Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. Kamen and Tom here with Tom Castleman. Ready for a big show today? We talk about who should win the NFL MVP. Is it Josh Allen? Is it Saquon Barkley? Is it somebody else? Plus, we have a pair of big matchups of likely playoff teams. Not likely, almost for sure playoff teams. Chiefs and Chargers, Lions hosting the Packers. Couple big games to talk about. Who's going to win those showdowns and what's going to be the key. Plus, it's college football conference championship week. We got the Big Ten, we got the SEC, we got the Big 12, we got the ACC. We pick all those games, and all those teams, of course, will earn automatic bids to the wacky, weird, messed up college football playoff field. It's going to be really, really fun. Plus, betting locks of the week, sports trivia, statements of the week, and more. I can't wait to get started, Tom. How are you doing on this Wednesday night?
I am doing the best that I can to stay warm as winter is
Too cold.
fully hit Chicago in full swing, and a team that certainly had no problem staying warm, and a player that had no problem staying warm. Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Let's just jump right in with this MVP conversation because this seems to be quickly turning into a one-man race as far as the MVP goes. Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson, pretty good team, but certainly not at a
Fading.
historic place. This is a team, or this is a year where Patrick Mahomes, statistically not at his best. This is certainly a far cry from his heights. So he is pretty much nowhere near the MVP conversation,
He's
even as the
fifth, I
Chiefs.
think, or sixth in betting odds, but pretty far back.
That's by his standards, that's pretty far back, and the fact that the Chiefs are 11-1, I think, are is doing a lot to keep him in that position. As you know, whether we'd like it or not, team success does have a role to play in the MVP determination. And for recent vintage, this typically goes to a quarterback. So it certainly feels like with the way that the Bills are playing at 10-2 on the season, having that one win against the Kansas City Chiefs this year, with certainly some signature moments, especially that little throw the ball to Amari Cooper, catch the lateral, run it in for a touchdown. This really feels like Josh Allen's year. But let's not forget that there are other positions that play football. And a little bit of a renaissance, a resurgence of the aged running back this year, as we're seeing multiple guys across the league: Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, and most notably Saquon Barkley, veteran running backs going to new teams and having success in their late 20s, which is typically when people start ringing the big bell that's the death knell of running
It's
backs.
different now, though, Tom.
It
It's a
is.
modern system, modern
It's
medicine. It's different.
it's different, and I think it's more that these are different players, that these are different level players than what we typically see. And certainly when you see, as I was talking about highlight plays, the Saquon Barkley let me pivot and turn into a backwards hurdle and keep going.
Ridiculous.
Signature moments of his own this year, setting, I think it was just shy actually of the Eagles single game rushing record, where Nick Sirianni, gave him the opportunity. Hey, do you want to go for it? He's like, no, I'm good. It doesn't matter to me very much. Let's just get the win and get out of here. So I think if we're going to talk about this, I do feel really strongly it's a one-person race. But how much do you think Saquon Barkley merits to be in this conversation?
I might surprise you a little bit. So
Oh,
there's two ways to look at this award.
sure.
One is who's gonna win, and two is who should win. As far as who's gonna win, I'm 100% lockstep with you. It's Josh Allen.
Hmm.
Josh Allen is having an incredible season. He's been the best quarterback this season. His Bills only have 2 losses, a win over the Chiefs. Lamar's team has 5 losses. I mean, Joe Burrow putting up stats. His team has 8 losses. Baker Mayfield putting up stats. His squad is 6-6. Mahomes has put up much better numbers in recent weeks. I will say he is coming back into this race ever since getting DeAndre Hopkins. I believe I saw a number before the Raiders week. He was first in passing touchdowns the last 4 to 5 weeks. That might have changed after only 1 touchdown that game. Jared Goff having a great season as well. But I look at Lamar Jackson. He's gotten the MVP before. Mahomes, he's gotten the MVP before. The Bucks, their record is way too bad for Mayfield to be up for MVP. Golf, almost in some ways, doesn't get enough credit for what he's doing, but too many people are talking about all the guys around the Lions. So as far as who's been the best quarterback, Josh Allen is going to win because it's a quarterback award. He's
Hmm.
minus anywhere from minus 225 to minus 280,
Hmm.
depending on what sports book you're looking at. So he's going to win. I actually don't think he should win.
Really?
I think the MVP for me is Saquon Barkley because I think he's having a historic season. What would it take for a quarterback to not win the MVP? It would be a running back getting a historic season and a quarterback not having a historic season. I mean, Saquon Barkley, yes, he's getting the 17th game, but he's currently on pace to break the single season rushing record. He will become the 9th running back ever with 2,000 rush yards in a season. He'll likely be first all time in rush yards for a season. He's averaging 6.1 yards per carry. He's third in rushing touchdowns, just 2 back of Derrick Henry for the most. That's despite all the 1 yard tush push touchdowns he's missed. Actually, it goes Henry, Hurts, Saquon in touchdowns. I would pick Josh Allen as the one best quarterback, but from a statistical standpoint, and stats are not everything, Tom. There's more than stats in this race. But from a statistical standpoint, Josh Allen is not clearly even the best quarterback statistically. He's currently 13th in passing yards, 6th in passing touchdowns, and 10th in passer rating. He is second in QBR, which I think is the best stat, accounts for rushing as well as passing, as well as clutch play. But his numbers 20 touchdowns and 5 picks. Very good season. Gets a lot of rushing touchdowns. But I mean, he's got 20 passing touchdowns in 12 games? That's by no means anything crazy. It's not anything historic. I mean, he's having a good season. I know he doesn't have great targets. That's why I probably say his numbers, he's better than the numbers because he's doing more with less. That's why he should be MVP for quarterbacks. But Saquon is having one of the best running seasons of all time. I think the Eagles' offense, with and without him, way, way different. And I think we had that opportunity to see, like when Jalen Brown, when A.J. Brown was out and Jalen Hurts didn't have Devontae Smith, didn't have A.J. Brown, he struggled a little bit through some picks. They struggled. They really turned to Saquon to take over the team. Saquon, compared to what, DeAndre Swift did last year, compared to what the year before Miles Sanders did, he is miles ahead of those guys. This guy really is contributing to W's. Without Saquon Barkley, the Eagles might have 5, 6, 7 losses. I mean, that could be the same case maybe for the Bills, but I think he's more dominant, far more dominant than Josh Allen, because I think there's a host of quarterbacks right now that you can look at that are at least on Allen's level, if not better. All due respect to Derrick Henry, who's a terrific running back. With the recent weeks of Saquon, with his receiving, with everything he offers, there's not a running back even close to Saquon. So a lot of ball game to be played. This MVP race is not over. The Chiefs go 16-1. Mahomes keeps putting up better numbers. He could get back in this race. The Lions go 16-1. Jared Goff could get in this race. This race is not over. But right now, at least at this stage in the season, I think Josh Allen will win. I'd vote him as the second MVP, but my personal MVP, because I don't view it as a quarterback award. Quarterback's the most important position. The most valuable player to a team this season, for me, has been Saquon Barkley. He's having a historic running season. There's not a quarterback right now having a historic season by any means in the National Football League.
Yeah, I'm right there with you pretty much in thinking that Josh Allen is going to win the award. I think I'm a little bit more on top, or a little bit more aligned with his merits for winning it. I know that, I mean, he's having, at least for him, a really good season insofar as he's taking care of the ball. Part of the reason why his QBR is at, I believe, the second highest currently that it's ever been, is that he's only thrown 5 interceptions through 12 games this season. And he's done a much better job of taking care of the ball. And basically, if you want to take the MVP, where the reason why it's going to quarterbacks so much is, the most valuable player should be the one that the team looks that much worse without them if you do some hypothetical magical scenario. And of course,
Sure.
this is true for almost any team in the NFL. You take away the starting quarterback, the team as a whole is going to sputter a lot. And Josh Allen, I mean, the numbers might not be there, but his impact certainly has been for the Bills in terms of them going away from the having a number one overall receiver. I know they picked up Amari Cooper, but even at this juncture, it's kind of hard to call Amari Cooper a bona fide number one, given that he hasn't been with the team all season, so he's still kind of
Sure. He's
working
good.
in. Talent wise, yeah, but I'm saying in terms of the fit and the scheme, coming in midway through the season, it's hard to have that same level of impact. But
I think I
what you're
will say,
talking about,
Tom, though, Josh Allen is no question the MVP of the Bills, but I
mhm,
think James Cook has been really, really good. And I
sure,
think James Cook is not getting enough credit for that Bills offense and what it's doing because Allen, like you said, way less picks this season, still throwing for a lot of touchdowns, still running for a lot of
mhm,
yards. His passing yards are down this season, in part because the targets aren't there, but in part because Buffalo found a really good running back, not even James Cook only. They have two or three really good backs.
yeah,
Their
they've
running
committed
game has
to,
made the situation easier for Josh
mhm,
Allen. Obviously, Mitch Trubisky, the backup, they would not be a playoff team with Trubisky,
yeah,
but they would still win a few games. They have a tough defense. They're playing really good defense, really good running game.
mhm,
I think it's not even a knock on Josh Allen because here's the truth, Tom. Whenever a team does really good, most of the time, who gets too much credit and too much blame? The quarterback and the head coach
mhm.
always get too much credit when things are going good, and they always get too much blame when things are going bad. Now, everyone looks at the quarterback and the coach. If they're winning, we love the quarterback. He's great. If we're losing, we hate the quarterback. He stinks. Same goes for the coach. So, not saying Josh Allen's not a legitimate MVP candidate,
No, for
not
sure.
saying he's not the most valuable Bill, but I think we're devaluing James Cook and the Bills running game just a little bit when talking about Josh Allen's MVP status.
No, I mean, like, I think I think there's an opportunity, and there's going to be an opportunity for both Saquon and for Josh Allen to bolster their MVP cases. Because you look at what Saquon has done to this point behind this really really talented Eagles offensive line, and I know that's what's going to be something that the detractors to the MVP case say is that, oh well, of course he looks good. He's running behind this Philadelphia Eagles line that made DeAndre Swift look good, that made Jordan Howard look good, that makes
Not
a lot
this
of running
good.
backs look good.
Not
Number
this
one, not
good.
this good. I mean, you're looking at I'm looking at the numbers right here by a solid yard. This is his best average yards per rush in his career by a full yard. He already is tied for his career high in touchdowns scored in a season, rushing touchdowns scored rather in a season. He's a couple off the pace if you want to say, for receiving touchdowns, he's a little bit off there, but that's because the Eagles just aren't using him in that same capacity. They're just giving him the ball and letting him go to work, and he's been going to work. I don't disagree with you in the slightest when saying that Saquon Barkley, I think, is a very meritorious MVP candidate, especially if he's able to go through the rest of the season and keep up on this pace, which I don't see why he wouldn't. I mean, Eagles have a game against Carolina, a team that isn't a very strong defensive team. Pittsburgh's going to be difficult, no doubt. But then you've got Washington, Dallas, and then the New York Giants again. None of those teams are really stalwarts on defense. So I think Saquon Barkley
He's gonna
absolutely
eat.
has plenty of
He's gonna
opportunity.
eat.
I think the one challenge and hurdle really to overcome is how he does
Hurdle.
against
Saquon.
Pittsburgh.
Get it?
Exactly. I know what I'm doing here. I'm pseudo amateur
You're very
professional about
punny,
this.
Tom Castleman,
Um,
today.
but Pittsburgh is going to be that kind of statement game where if he's able to go out there and put up maybe not necessarily super huge numbers, but if he can clips like a buck 25 running, get a touchdown, like really have an impact on that game, that could be something that seals it away for him. And looking at Josh Allen and the Bills schedule, they have a
Lions.
similar, exactly, Detroit
Forgot by the
in
Lions.
Detroit.
Next
That's going to
week.
be a signature game because they've got at Rams this week, and the Rams are kind of ho hum. You're ending the season with the Patriots twice and the Jets, but that Detroit game, and then for the Eagles that Pittsburgh game, those are going to be two pretty significant matchups as far as determining, I think, in large part the outcome of this MVP race.
Well,
So,
one
I'm,
final thing, Tom. Does
Mhm.
Saquon break the single season rushing record?
Does he?
Yes. He's on pace right now, just barely, but he's on pace right now to break it. And keep in mind, the last few
Coin
weeks, his
flip.
numbers have skyrocketed because he was not on pace after, week 4 or 5.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's actually a little bit surprising given that Baltimore's defense has been traditionally this season really staunch against the run. The fact that he was able to put up those numbers against them, I would say, ah, I'm like a 60-40 split on whether or not he breaks. I think Pittsburgh is going to be a significant factor, and then I think that last game of the season, if the Eagles go out and they're able to seal away the division, they've already beat Washington once. If they beat Washington again, have a commanding lead on the division, but are the second seed type of thing, I could very easily see them giving their players a bye week the last week of the season
Well, what if
just
they're
to
still
get
in
everybody
contention for the
rested up.
1 seed? Only
I
one
mean,
game back in the
I
Lions.
mean, that's why I'm 60-40. Like, if they're going all out all the way, I absolutely can see
So
Saquon
you
doing
think
that.
if
But I
Saquon
also,
Barkley needs, like, let's just say 110 yards, week 18, last game of the season, they've clinched the 2 seed, they can't get the 1 seed. You think they're not going to give him a chance to break that record? He's going to sit 110 yards short of that record.
I think he is going to say, I care about a Super Bowl. I think that's the ultimate vindication for him. I think more so than setting a single season rushing record.
I think he's going to play that last week no matter what and break the record the last week, Tom. I know it's easy to say that,
Mhm.
but when that record comes at you, I think you're going to get the record. I think he's going to go for it, and I think he's going to get
Hmm.
it. And that's the only chance he has of getting the MVP, by the way. Even with the record, it's going to be kind of tough, but his only
Mhm.
hope for getting the MVP is setting that record, which is ironic because, let's just say he gets 2,100 rush yards and he gets 2,107 rush yards. 7 rush yards mean nothing, but they're symbolic because 2,105 rush yards, Eric Dickerson's record since 1984, Tom.
Hmm.
40 years that record has
Yeah,
stood. That's impressive, man. That is impressive.
that's true. I don't know. It's one of those would you rather's, and it's not necessarily a completely a
I mean,
binary
there's no
or
guarantee they win the Super Bowl. I mean, they're
exactly.
obviously like they're
Yeah.
and they're not even the favorites in the NFC. The whole rust
Mhm.
versus rest thing affects different teams differently. I'm not too sure that I actually prefer guys playing that last game of the season
Mm.
personally, at least playing a half or so. So that's kind of what I prefer. But that's a whole nother topic we can just go over. But it's just you need that sharpness sometimes, Tom. You need that
Sure.
sharpness sometimes, unless you're like the Kansas City Chiefs or something. I think
Hmm.
that sharpness kind of helps that
I
last game
mean,
of the season.
the one counter is I believe the Eagles had their bye week in week 5. So I could easily see them saying, you know what, as sharp as we want to be, we need a little bit of a break too. So I mean, it can go either way. A lot is going to determine on how these next few games go for Saquon and the Eagles, and really the Lions as well. Quite frankly, as the Lions are playing the Green Bay Packers this week in one of the big matchups that we got to talk about because that's right now Lions sitting at that number 1 seed, Packers firmly ensconced in the playoff hunt. But this is a big game in the NFC North. So, Common, who are you liking in this one? I mean, I think we're probably both going to be ending up the same way, given how, last time we did the show, we did declare the Lions the best team in the NFL. And to this point, haven't really done anything to dissuade us, right?
Yeah, I surprisingly I'm hearing some people picking the Packers in this game, and I know the Lions have some injuries to their defense. They have a couple defensive starters, couple secondary defensive players, but last I checked, Penei Sewell's going to be there, the best
Hmm.
offensive lineman in the game right now. Jameer Gibbs, David Montgomery, the best 1-2 punch in the NFL. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta coming off a 2-touchdown game. Jared Goff, Ben Johnson will be there calling plays. So I think the Lions could blow out the Packers. I mean, even if their defense isn't 100% healthy, I mean, if they won in Green Bay 24-14 at Lambeau Field, cold conditions, rainy game. Actually, I think the Packers scored a late touchdown in that game. It actually wasn't even indicative of how close the game was. The Lions, by the way, have the Packers number, Tom. 5 of the last 6 meetings, the Lions have won all 5 of those by 4 points or more. So the fact that Detroit's a -3 favorite, I mean, they say 3 points is the home field advantage. You're telling me that Vegas on a neutral field thinks the Lions and Packers is a virtual toss-up? Again, there is some injuries for the Lions defense. I will acknowledge that. But that's crazy to me, Tom. It does not make any sense. The Lions are a way more explosive offense. They have a better running game, a better passing game. Their defense has been incredible this season. I actually think that second half against the Bears in some ways was a wake-up call. It's not always going to be easy. If anything, to me, they're going to be more motivated to point out, come out there and say, like, this was kind of just a bad half. We're not going to do this again, the rest of the season. So Green Bay has a really good team. They got a good defense. They got a good quarterback. They got a good running back. They're a playoff team, no doubt about it. But they are not better than the Detroit Lions, Tom. Detroit at home, they should win. And I think they'll cover -3. I don't know. I think the spread is a little bit disrespectful towards the Detroit Lions personally.
Yeah, I think that a lot of folks are looking at what Green Bay did against Miami and then looking at
What's Miami's
Chicago.
record in cold games, Tom? I mean, come
Not
on.
not great, but I think
At
enough
Lambeau
people
Field, what they
enough
do in the
people give the
second half?
recency
Green Bay played
bias.
one good half against Miami. They got outplayed the second half.
I'm just saying, recency bias is a very real thing. I think folks can look at the Packers and say, "Hey, look what they did with their win over Miami." I think that they can look at the Detroit Lions and say, "Ooh, look at what they let the Chicago Bears do to them." Never mind the fact that the Bears do still have a positive point differential on the season. Probably one of the most talented 4-8 teams you're ever going to see. We'll get to that later. Don't any of you fret. But I think that there's enough people that are kind of like, well, there's no real rest advantage with both teams having played on Thanksgiving. Yeah, we'll give that home field advantage to the Detroit Lions, which I know like the traditional number is 3, but from what I've heard from betting sharps, the number's closer like 1.5 to a point is home field advantage. Like the difference isn't quite what it used to be from conventional wisdom. So the way I read it is that with a 3-point spread, Lions are really favored by like a point or two. I definitely am picking the Lions to win this game.
The Lions will cover.
I think they'll probably cover
They're
as
covering,
well.
100% covering.
I think that they'll be able to
Tease
cover
the
as well.
segment later in the show. Wink, wink, nudge,
Because,
nudge.
like, Green Bay can be, like, firing on all cylinders really, really good, but then Jordan Love also's got a little bit of that Brett Favre in him, and I mean the throwing interceptions kind, not taking money from welfare people kind of Brett Favre in him.
I'm glad you clarified that, because I was thinking the welfare thing, Tom.
Yeah, no, like Jordan Love's got a little bit of that,
And that Lions defense is
throw it away.
opportunistic.
Yeah,
That's exactly what they'll do. They'll force a couple of turnovers, and that to me will be the difference in the game.
It kind of depends a little bit on Jordan Love, really more than anybody else, on whether this game is going to be a cover, a close one, or if it's going to be a little bit of a blowout. I mean, we know Josh Jacobs and the run game has been really strong for Green Bay all year. So it's just kind of like hit and miss a little bit with the Packers. I do think Lions are going to win. I'm fairly comfortable saying that they would cover as well if we wanted to put a margin of victory on it. But I mean, it's really like strength against strength. Lions 6-0 at home, Green Bay 4-1 on the road. These are two really, really good. It's going to be a good game to watch. Is really the one thing we can definitely count on. I'm going to go Lions. I'm not as bullish as you are, but it's still like, I don't know, I get the sense that you're like 90-10 on Lions. I'm more of like 65-35, frankly.
Probably more like 85-15.
Okay,
just to acknowledge any given Thursday. But I'm feeling pretty good about the Detroit Lions in this game.
You feeling good about the Kansas City Chiefs? Because they've got the Chargers in an AFC West matchup that, frankly, I'll admit it, AFC West is a little bit more not competitive, but stronger than I thought it was going to
Way
be.
better. The
Preseason
Chargers and Broncos are playoff teams, Tom.
gave no credence to. I don't think either of us gave any credence to either team being particularly strong teams. I mean, I think the
I
way
had the
I kind
Chargers
of
going over 500. I had them just on the outside. They were one of my
yeah,
wild card possibilities. I think I picked them on the outside looking in.
I think I had it that the Raiders and Broncos were going to be nothing, and so because they're playing in the AFC West, somebody had to pick up a couple of those non-Kansas City games, and so I kind of pegged the Chargers for that. But I certainly did not peg them as an 8-4 team, and a team that a little bit of an interesting story on them so far this season. Because I know we're going to be getting a lot into talking Kansas City Chiefs, but this is a team that played the Chiefs pretty strong early on in the season, but just didn't seem to have kind of that firepower. A team that was winning a lot with a strong run game and good defense. Well, their passing game has really been picking it up as the season's
Mm-hmm.
gone on. I'm sure plenty of that has to do with Justin Herbert actually being healthy, having that foot injury clear up for him, working on a little bit of a rapport with Lad McConkey, who's proven to
McConkey
be
looks good.
an exceptional route runner. Basically, everything that folks were saying about him in the draft process, about him being an exceptional runner, was simply can he be durable enough? Because he did suffer some injuries in Georgia. I mean, this is a team that the Chargers. I know I'm giving them like a lot of praise, but I do want to have the slight caveat that a lot of their wins have been against not great teams. If we look at their losses at Pittsburgh, at home against Kansas City, in Arizona, and then at home against Baltimore, all teams that are, if not in the playoffs, are strongly in the playoff hunt, with wins against Atlanta, Cincinnati, Tennessee, Cleveland, New Orleans, Denver, and then Carolina and Las Vegas. So it's been interesting to see the Chargers come on. I didn't think that they would necessarily be this good of a team, but I don't really give them that much of a puncher's chance against Kansas City. Like I do in the sense that divisional games are always a little bit odd in this sense that even if
Mm-hmm.
two teams are are fairly significantly different in talent because they're in the division because it's good coaching and Jim Harbaugh's done a
Harbaugh's
phenomenal
great.
job.
Harbaugh's
Um,
great.
I think this game probably feels about right with where the line is and my feelings on it, which is about a field goal, a shade more of an advantage to Kansas City in terms of how I feel with them coming out of this one. And it's going to come down to probably some, by hook or by crook, as Kansas City has seemingly done all season long with every single win that they've had, including the last one, which was just a really weird ending against Las Vegas and does not help the narrative at all about the whole NFL and Kansas City relationship. But
It
this
was the
feels
right
like
call, Tom.
I know, but I'm saying it doesn't help the narrative when that's how the
Okay.
game ends.
It was a
When
good call. The refs
it
made
was
the right call.
it was the correct call, but the fact that the referee goes in with the false start motion, I know they talk about it, but it just feeds into the narrative
Don't
that a
feed into
lot of
this
folks
narrative, Tom. Get out of this narrative. It was the same narrative with the Patriots. When a team wins too much, people try to
sure.
make up narratives out there.
Yeah, absolutely. But narratively speaking, Common, do you think that the Chargers have a chance to actually pull off the upset here on Sunday night? Or do you think that's going to be the Chiefs? Do you feel it's going to be close? Or do you think that Kansas City might be putting something together here?
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I'm leaning towards close. I mean, obviously, you know me, I'm a Chiefs fan, so I'm
Mhm.
hoping they put it together and blow them out. But even when the Chiefs are at their absolute best, the Chargers have always played them really, really tough. I mean, you heard me on the show a couple weeks ago. I love the Chargers team. They have a top five defense in the NFL. They have a top five quarterback. I think Lad McConkey is really good. We're seeing Georgia Bulldogs. Lad McConkey, Brock Bowers. You think they missed those guys? I think they do. I think they miss those guys quite a bit. I think a really important factor to me, though, is that J.K. Dobbins is out in this game. Kansas City has been particularly really, really good stopping the run. But I mean, J.K. Dobbins has been a phenomenal running back. Gus Edwards is good. He's not J.K. Dobbins good. So I think the Chargers will become very one dimensional. I do think Kansas City's secondary in recent weeks has been a little bit vulnerable. But I think the fact that it'll be a one-dimensional Charger offense does help the Chiefs a little bit in some ways. I mean, Justin Herbert only has one interception this season. You want to talk about taking care of the ball? That man has taken care of the ball for the Chargers, Justin Herbert. The Chiefs are playing at Arrowhead Stadium. They're at home in a division game, which they own the division. I'm not going to pick against the Chiefs. It's not going to happen. They're going to find a way to win like they always do. But I think, Tom, there's been this other narrative of Mahomes not putting up as much numbers as he usually does. You start looking at passing yards per game, you start looking at completion percentage. Every week, Mahomes is going up, up, and up. I think he's had a little bit of bad luck with some touchdowns. Some of those red zone drives have been field goals or rushing touchdowns. Some of those picks have been tip balls. What is the law of averages? Mahomes has been very fortunate in his career with tip balls. This season, Mahomes has the most tip balls interceptions I've ever seen. So I think those numbers are a little bit unlucky, Tom. And again, I saw the stat. Now, it was since DeAndre Hopkins came to the Chiefs, Tom. This was prior to the Raiders week. Mahomes was first in the NFL in touchdown passes, and he was like top 5 in passing yards. So I think that Chiefs offense is putting it together. Hollywood Brown coming back on Christmas. Isaiah Pacheco just got back. I don't know about this game because the Chargers defense is really good, but I think this narrative of KC not having an offense, they're still right around top 10 in points, yards in the NFL. We're not talking about the 20th offense in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
They're a top 10 offense in the league this season, Tom, the Kansas City Chiefs. So just let that sink in a little bit. Look at where Mahomes is in pass yards. He's top 10 in every category. Just because we're used to him being number 1, number 2, we're not talking about a guy that's managing games or a guy that is 20th in the league in passing yards, 20th in the league in passing yards. I'm going to look it up right now, Tom, where Mahomes ranks in NFL stats. Passing stats, Patrick Mahomes currently is 9th in passing yards. And, I mean, a couple of the guys he's behind. He's like 3 yards behind Jared Goff. Now, he's like 4 yards behind Matthew Stafford. So, with the big game, he moves into 7th in the NFL in pass yards. He's 70 yards behind Baker Mayfield, like 70 yards behind Kirk Cousins. A couple big games, this guy is right back in the top 5 in the NFL in passing yards. Patrick Mahomes. He's tied for 8th in passing touchdowns. He goes out and has a 3 passing touchdown game, Tom. He'll be 5th in passing touchdowns in the league. So I think there's a little bit of a narrative. I would call it a false narrative around Kansas City's offense. I'm going to look it up right now. Points per game scored for the Chiefs right now. Let's see. Team points per game. So they are in, points per game. Kansas City, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11th, but again, percentage points away from being 8th in the league in passing touchdowns or total points scored. So it's not like this Chiefs offense is not good, Tom Castleman.
Mm-hmm.
They're well above average when it comes to the National Football League. They're just not what we're used to seeing. They get Hollywood Brown. They get Isaiah Pacheco. Fireworks will be coming out of Kansas City in due time. So I do like the Chiefs in this game. Home field matters. I think it's going to be close. It's going to be ugly. But the Chiefs will find a way to knock out the Chargers in this highly contested AFC West game. And they'll keep on winning. It's what they do. Don't be shocked to see them lose only 1 game this season.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas City always seems to find a way to win. Is there a little bit of luck involved? Sure. Every championship team has a little bit of luck involved. But these guys always seem to deliver in the moment. The one slight concern I have about Kansas City is their defense has regressed the last few weeks. Their other slight concern is the offensive line has struggled a little bit the last few weeks. But they brought a new offensive lineman in. And there's a lot of hope around Kansas City that he should help that offensive line for sure.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a highly anticipated rematch coming up on Saturday. And not to be outdone when talking about highly anticipated rematches, we've got a huge one in the college football world. We've got in the SEC, Texas and Georgia playing. for the SEC championship, and really, should I say, bolstering a chance potentially for Georgia to be in the playoff. I don't know if the committee's going to leave them out if they have two losses to Texas, or if they have a loss to Texas this season. I know they beat Texas as Texas's only loss on the year, and that was in Texas. This one's going to be a little bit more of a home game, if you will. I know technically it's a neutral site, but it is in Atlanta, Georgia, which is a lot closer to Athens, Georgia, than it is the state of Texas. So, Common, how are you feeling about this one? Because we've got a Georgia Bulldogs team that, prior to this season, their only losses seemed to come to Alabama. And when they lost to Alabama in week 4 of their season, the same, narratives and graphics are coming out. Then they have a pretty significant loss in Mississippi to Ole Miss, a 28-10 loss. And they've just kind of looked a bit mercurial all season. Sometimes they're winning these big blowout games like they did against Mississippi State. Sometimes they're eking out these tiny little victories, like that 13-12 victory over Kentucky. This is not the Georgia team of the past couple of years, a team that typically does really well with recruiting and getting five-star guys cycling in and out, but this certainly feels like a team that doesn't have as much NFL talent as it has in the past couple of years, and quite frankly, showing. So as they're going up against Quinn Ewers and the Longhorns, how are you feeling on this one, Cam? I believe it's a slight edge to Texas on the betting side of things. Do you
Two and
feel
a
that
half
this
points.
is? Do you feel that's worthy, that Texas is worth having that advantage, given this is a neutral site, but in the state of Georgia, not really all that neutral?
Yeah, I'm a little torn on this game. I mean, I think Georgia's had a weird season. I'm trying to figure
Hmm.
out, part of it is that Carson Beck, who was supposed to be a first round quarterback, I don't know if he's played himself out of a first round pick with, quite frankly, a pretty bad season on his part. I mean,
Hmm.
he's been throwing interceptions left and right, Tom Castleman. I'm actually going to look it up right now on my phone, how many picks he has, because he's had multiple 2 or 3 interception games. I mean, Georgia has not been all that impressive this season. Let's see. Carson Beck has 12 interceptions this season. So, I mean, this is going to go down to him. If he throws a bunch of picks, it could get ugly. If he plays, the football that he can play, sure, they could easily win. I mean, I think it gets really interesting if Texas wins by, 1 score. It's a close game. Then what does the committee do with Georgia? Because I think that, I mean, if Georgia wins, they're in the playoff. It's number 2 versus
Hmm.
number 5. If Texas loses, they're still in 2 losses. Texas would have to lose by like 50 points, which I don't think is going to happen, obviously, for them to be out of the playoff. I think this is like a sort of like a matchup based game. I think Texas, in some ways, has been a more impressive team. I don't think they match up well against Georgia. I think what
Sure.
makes Texas so good is their athletes, their running backs, their wide receivers. They're a very athletic team, and that's how they can beat teams with their athleticism. Line of scrimmage, though, Tom, in games like this is massive. Let me read some numbers in their last matchup for me that are very, very scary for Texas Longhorn fans. Georgia, in the last game they played in Texas, Tom Castleman,
Hmm.
their defense had 7 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. Carson Beck, actually, Tom, had 0 touchdown passes and 3 interceptions, and Georgia still won 30-15. It was a game that led 23-0. That controversial pick as well. That was kind of a controversial call. 7 sacks for Georgia, just 1 for Texas. I think they have a huge edge at the line of scrimmage. Texas has a better quarterback, 2 better quarterbacks, in fact, better
Yeah.
playmakers. But last time out, Tom, not only was it a sack show, Georgia had 27 carries, or not Georgia, Texas, excuse me, 27 carries for 29 rush yards. Adjustments can be made. Adjustments will be made. Texas will not lose by 2 touchdowns. It'll be close. It'll go down to the wire. But that's absolute domination at the line of scrimmage. To me, Tom, there's probably too many adjustments Texas has to make. On the D line, on the O line, I think Texas is overmatched. For as good as Texas has been, their SEC schedule this year, Tom, avoided a lot of these SEC powerhouses. They had a quote unquote soft SEC schedule.
Sure.
You don't have nice wins this season. They're not prepared for this game, quite honestly. They're not prepared for this Georgia team. So, I mean, is the spread fair? I mean, I guess Georgia has 2 losses, Texas has 1. But given what we saw last time out, as a better, I'm tempted to take Georgia money line because that's the investment on the betting front. I just can't say confidently I believe in Georgia just because Carson Beck could throw 5 picks. He can throw 5 touchdowns and no picks, or he can throw no touchdowns and 5 picks. Neither result would shock me. But because of the dominance of the line of scrimmage, I'm going to lean Georgia in the SEC title game. Also because I want to see more teams in the college football playoff out of the SEC. And I want to see Georgia prove why they belong in, as opposed to us having this debate like, should Georgia have gotten in with the 3 losses? I think they make it easy for the CFP committee. Win in Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with you, leaning slightly toward Georgia as well on this one. Because the whole, they have that head-to-head win against Texas, which I think is pretty significant. And that was in a game where we had one of those nightmarish Carson Beck games. No touchdowns, 3 interceptions for him, and what was pretty easily his worst game of the season. And Georgia was still able to win 30-15. So we can talk about the adjustments that Texas is going to be able to make. I think that Georgia's going to have some adjustments to make as well. And I think that for as poorly as not as bad as Carson Beck's stats look, I mean, 9 out of the 12 interceptions came in 3 games, with throwing 3 picks to Florida, 3 picks against Texas, 3 against Alabama, and then he had no touchdowns and an interception that lost against Ole Miss. I mean, these are all pretty big name programs. So for the most part, I think Beck's been pretty decent on the season, had a good game against Tennessee.
A lot of yards and touchdowns. That's still those picks. I mean, Texas is a pretty good team, Tom.
That's gonna be what it comes down to is Georgia going to be able to take care of the football the way that they need to in order to win this game? I think the answer to that question is going to be yes. I think that I lean that the Bulldogs are going to be in the playoff no matter what. But when you have a coach that's as good as Kirby Smart is, I think he's going to be pulling out all the stops. I think he's going to do as much as he can to QB proof, mistake proof this game. Because as much as, I think that it's a lock for Georgia to make it into the college football playoff. One, the coach certainly isn't going to feel that way. So he's definitely going to be coaching his guys up on it's
They're not a lock, Tom.
Type of situation.
They're not a lock. They lose by 2 or 3 touchdowns. Okay, I think they might be on the way out.
I was operating within that is an outlier outcome. I'm saying if they lose and it's like a 7.3-point single possession type game, I still see Georgia getting into the college football playoff because the committee's going to want to put as many SEC teams.
What if they put Bama in
can.
instead? Because of a head-to-head win against Georgia.
Alabama did not play in the SEC championship, so
I'm just saying. They would both have 3 losses. Alabama head-to-head win.
Yeah, but one of them made it all the way to the SEC championship, and one did not. I have my many myriad gripes with college football and how it's choosing to do its postseason format, but I think that there's a lot of motivating factors here for Georgia. It's also going to be we're not going to let these newcomers come in here and take the SEC title in their very first season in the conference. Like, it just doesn't roll that way. So I'm going to go Georgia Bulldogs by a slight margin as well. But this is definitely going to be an exciting matchup. Big Ten is going to be another one as we've got a couple of top 5 teams. We've got number 1 Oregon, number 3 Penn State. Kamen, how are you liking this one to shake out potentially?
Yeah, this one I think I feel probably out of all the, Power 4 conferences, probably I feel the best about this one. Maybe
Mm,
SMU over Clemson, but I feel really good about Oregon. I actually think this spread a little bit disrespectful to Oregon. I mean,
mm,
Oregon's the only undefeated team. They're 12-0. They knocked off Ohio State. They knocked off Boise State, two, borderline top 10 teams in the country. They've crushed everybody else in all their games. Whereas Penn State, Tom, notorious in recent seasons for beating up on the easy teams and
hmm.
struggling against the good teams. Ohio State has their number again. Ohio State won at Penn State. Michigan has their number. I mean, I think Oregon is just a more explosive team. Now, if you look at the points, 36.2 for Oregon, 33.3 for Penn State, relatively close. 3-point edge for Oregon, but I think a lot of this is skewed stats against bad teams. I mean, Penn State put up 56 against Kent State, 49 against Purdue. Some of these better defenses, like Oregon's defense, they put up 13 against Ohio State, 21 against Illinois. Now, Drew Aller, albeit improved from last season, he's taken a step forward. Compared to Dylan Gabriel, are you kidding me? Dylan Gabriel, legitimate Heisman contender, more passing yards, more rushing yards, way more explosive quarterback, way better offense. And James Franklin's a good coach. He has not beaten some of these good coaches, though.
Hmm.
Head to head. Dan Lanning at Oregon is one of the best coaches in college football, if not the best. I think Oregon should cruise in this game. At least a touchdown, Tom. We could have like a late score to make it close, but I think it could be like a 7-10 point win, maybe even a 2 touchdown win. I think Oregon to me is considerably more explosive, a considerably better football team. And I mean, while the other game's a toss up, honestly, Tom, I might do the rare situation where I don't bet on that game. Although Georgia money line sounds good, I might stay away from that game. Just enjoy
Hmm.
it, right? This game, I'm hammering the Ducks. Oregon minus 3.5. They should win. They should cover. Penn State will be in the playoff. It would have to be something absolutely wild for them not to make it. I mean, they're number 3 in the country, so they're squarely in the playoff, Tom. But I think Oregon, the 1 seed, they're in as well. I think they have a point to prove. I think in a season where you've heard me say on the show, there's not an all-time great team. There's not a really, really good college team right now. There's not a
Hmm.
team I look at that I would consider, all-time great college team. It's wide open. And I said on the show, I don't know if there's one team that stands out. I think Oregon's the one that is kind of standing out, and it's kind of their chance to prove that they are the team to beat. Because I do think they're the team to beat, Tom. If
Hmm.
I was picking right now CFP champion, I'm inclined to pick the Oregon Ducks. Quack, quack. So go Ducks for
Hmm.
sure in this game over Penn State.
Yeah, if we want to talk about bigger picture, the committee, the college football committee, and just college football at large, having the perfect season to debut this 12-team playoff,
Perfect.
because you
Worked out
you
perfect.
do this like even like last year, 2 years ago, nobody's picking anybody who's outside of the top two, maybe three teams. As far as the national champion this year, you could make a legitimate
Last year
case.
would have been good. Georgia didn't make the CFP, but I think a couple years ago would have been a lot harder.
Yeah, like Georgia didn't make it last year, but like after that, like it was a pretty
And Florida
clear
State
drop
was
off.
undefeated, didn't make it either. I think
Yeah, but
last year would have
we
been
saw it after
okay,
that.
but the year
Maybe,
before that, it would have been,
maybe.
different.
I just think that I'm agreeing with you. Like even though Oregon's undefeated, it doesn't feel like it's been that amazing of a season for them. And frankly, I think a little bit is the schedule that they played. I mean, they had that really great game against OSU where it was a 1 point margin of victory. But if we're talking about Penn State and their schedule, looking at Penn State and Oregon, they both played the same other Big Ten team that was ranked in the top 20 at some point this season, and that's the University of Illinois. The only real difference is that 7 point loss for Penn State against Ohio State and a 1 point win for the Oregon Ducks against Ohio State. If I'm going to pick somebody, I'm going to go with Oregon though. Dane Lanning, I think, is a really, really good coach. I think James Franklin is a pretty good coach, but he definitely, like you said, has that reputation of not necessarily being able to play up in the big games and really have a good shot to win, or doesn't come through with the win. Saw a close game against Minnesota just a couple of weeks ago for the Penn State Nittany Lions, so they can be had. They can kind of play down to their competition or have an off night a little bit. So I'm also going to go with the Oregon Ducks on this one. I'm kind of with you that I don't think it's going to be as close as the line suggests it's going to be. But that's on James Franklin and the Nittany Lions to prove. I mean, they are a win away from perhaps being number one in the country, having that top seed in the college football playoff. If they get that win, and then if Georgia beats Texas, wide open for Penn State to grab that number one spot. But like I said, I'm going with Oregon on this one as well. So those are like probably the two big conferences. That's just the way that the college football realignment has gone. But we do have some championships for the Big 12 and the ACC that we ought to touch on really quickly. So let's start
It's
with
an automatic bid. It's very important,
It
Tom.
is an automatic bid. And let's go with the Big 12, a conference that you and I used to know way
MIZ.
back when, prior to ZOU. Some moves going on. We've got Iowa State, a longtime member of the Big 12, and then, as everybody knows, Arizona State in the Big 12
New
this
blood.
year. A lot of newcomers to conferences being in championships. So comment on this one. This was a situation where Iowa State needed like BYU to win. It was a nail biter for them to get that win over Kansas State, for which on the college football pick'em, I thank them greatly. And going up against Arizona State, do you go with the traditional conference standard bearer here with Iowa State, or do you think Arizona State's going to be representing the Big 12 their first year in this conference?
Yeah, this is probably the hardest game to pick, to be honest, Tom.
Mm,
And I think this is actually a really important game because the loser is out, the winner is in the
yes.
CFP. Number 15, Arizona State 10-2. Number 16, Iowa State 10-2. You lose, you're out. You win, you're in. Both teams have almost identical records, almost identical, rankings in the polls. They have
Hmm.
almost identical scoring averages, Tom, on offense and defense. They both went 7-2 in the Big 12. Both went 3-0 in the non-con. Arizona State scored 5 less total points, but allowed 6 less total points than Iowa State. So these teams in Big 12 play, their score differential within 1 point of each other, which speaks to just how evenly matched these two
Hmm.
teams are. It's a classic toss-up. But I'm going to go with the team that I did watch with my own eyes. I've watched Arizona State a couple times late at night, and I think they have the best player in this game. That would be the lead back, Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo is an incredible player, whereas you look at Iowa State, more of a system backs, more of a committee. This guy is a experienced, older player. His chance to prove it on the big stage. Iowa State's playing good football, but God, it's tough.
Hmm.
Gosh, it's tough. I'm going to go Cam Skattebo, though. I think that I would say right now, Arizona State, really, really hot football. Give me Arizona State to win a close game, Tom.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Um, I mean, we've agreed to this point.
You're going to be different just for fun.
I think I'll be different a little bit for fun, a little bit for. I liked how Iowa State played against Kansas State to close out the season. I know that was a really a big environment for them to have that home victory. Rocco Becht, I think, did just enough as a dual threat quarterback to be able to get them in a good position to win. Um, Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying to you if I said I had super in-depth knowledge on this Iowa State Cyclones, but these teams are just so evenly matched. Both of them just cannot seem to figure out Texas Tech University, as that was a team with a shared
Mahomes, you.
loss. So yeah, I'm going to go Iowa State. I'm going to go with the a bit of a classic pick here out of the Big 12 to represent. Like I said, good that that there's going to be a representative, of course, in the college football playoff, but not a team, not a conference that really has the sort of legs to go super deep into this conference tournament. So it'll be interesting to see how they get matched up seed wise going forward. If they can get a win and bring a little bit of representation to the Big 12 outside of just being named into the conference by way of that automatic bid. And of course, another conference that's going to have the automatic bid is going to be the ACC, where we'll close out our college football segment. We've got SMU against Clemson. Clemson, a team that early on in the season, I mean, obviously, Dabo Swinney, they've got the brand, the name, but they come into this one as an underdog, not just on the point spread, but in the ranking with the
Rightfully
Mustangs,
so.
eighth in the country. The Tigers, of course, are sitting at 17th. So, Kamen, how are you feeling on this one? This has been a bit of an up and down season for Clemson. Not really a strong way of bookending their year with a loss to Georgia and a loss to South Carolina, two ranked teams. Do you feel that they're a team that might be able to muster something to make it into the college football playoff, or do you think this is a team that every single win has come against an unranked opponent? In addition to those two ranked losses, they also lost by a pretty decent margin at home to Louisville, and that this is going to be Mustangs all the way.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Mustangs all the way. I mean, SMU is 11-1; they're eighth in the country. Clemson's 9-3, 17th in the country. SMU is playing really good football at the right time. They've won 9 games in a row, Tom. They only lost by 3 points to BYU week 3. I think
Hmm.
that SMU defense will slow down to, quite frankly, a struggling Clemson offense who only put up 14 points in that loss to South Carolina. Offense in general has really struggled recent weeks. Now, SMU is the hotter team. They're the better team. I think SMU wins. Clemson out of this game, out of the CFP. SMU gets the ACC representation in the college football playoff.
Yeah, Brashard Smith. I mean, I know we've been talking, or folks have been talking a lot about, Ashton Johnson is an amazing running back, but
He
Brashard
is
Smith
amazing.
with 14 touchdowns on the ground this season, over 1,100 rushing yards. This is one where I'm not just picking SMU to win; I'm really rooting for them to win. Because I have a sneaking suspicion that if Clemson gets the bid, they'll be the sole ACC team, or that maybe perhaps Miami gets in over SMU, which again is something that kind of that really boggles my mind and ticks me off, frankly, that a team that
I
finishes the
think it's going to be
season,
one, Tom, personally.
yeah, a team that finishes the season 11-1, and then they happen to lose in their championship game, their conference championship, and that's going to be used as a cudgel of punishment as opposed to looking at other teams. I understand the committee does the whole like, well, who's the best team as opposed to record and whatnot. That's why the football playoff is a dumb idea, in my opinion, as
I like
entertaining as
it.
it is.
Let's have
Um,
fun. 12 teams. Let's have
but
some fun.
but
I'm going to
yeah,
call you Ebenezer Scrooge over
hey,
there. The
hey,
Grinch that stole the college football playoff, Tom Castleman.
I'm all about the days, the ghost of college football past, and not really liking the present nor the future, quite frankly. Um, but no, I'm going to go SMU. I'm picking them in this one, and like I said, I'm rooting for them in this one because I think that they're a team that throughout the entire season has merited being in this college football playoff with a couple of ranked wins. Again, not that they deserve necessarily to be mentioned in the same breath as, say, a Texas, a Georgia, an Oregon, an Ohio State as a title contender, but certainly more so than some of these other teams on the fringe that aren't playing this weekend. Definitely, I think deserve a
What a
shot to
bad
be
loss
in.
for Ohio State, though, by the way. My goodness. Against Michigan, that was a rough,
an
rough loss
an
for the
entire
Buckeyes.
class of Buckeyes who have never beat the Wolverines. That's
Crazy.
quite something. But who's good at beating stuff? We're good
We
at
are.
beating the spread. We're good at betting lines and things.
We're very good
Um,
at that, especially you, Tom.
yeah, I believe I'm 13-5 if I have that correctly.
Let me double check here. I have it on my phone. Betting locks of the
I know
week.
we're both over 500.
13-5, Tom Castleman, for yourself. I'm 9-8-1. So we are both over 500. I think you were last week. I forgot to transfer this on my Word document, but you were 2-1. Steelers -3.5 at the Browns. We both
Hmm.
missed that one. Browns with
Yeah.
that big win. Now, a couple weeks, we had a bye week. It's been a couple weeks since the show, but the Browns winning 24-19 versus Pittsburgh. You had the Bucks -6 of the Giants. You were right. Now they won 37. I also had that game. So we went
Hmm.
1-1 riding together. You had the Lions -7 at the Colts. They won 24-6. I also rode that online. I did have the
There you
Niners
go.
+1.5 at the Packers. I would have, canceled this pick had I known Brock Purdy wouldn't play. I know we do the show early in the week, but
Yeah,
I'm going to keep it, Tom. The pick was made. I'm all right. I'm going to keep it.
that's a
So
bad
winning
beat right
records for
there.
both of us. Far over 500 for Tom. What do you got this week, Mr. Castleman?
So I thought I would go a little bit themed because it's a huge weekend in college football playoff, and also as I teased earlier on the show, just gonna put a little laurel on my head for winning our college football pick'em with confidence
Good
points
job,
this
Tom
year. Not
Castleman.
just most points, but also most picks as
Who's
well.
winning the
Uh,
NFL pick'em though? Who's ahead?
I think you got me by two so far. I made a little bit of a comeback last
Yeah,
week.
NFL,
We got
NFL.
a few weeks left to
I
hopefully.
beat you in fantasy too, Tom. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
Granted, it was a bye week for some of your
my
stars,
guys are resting
but
up
I
for the
was shook.
playoffs.
I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. I knocked off the mighty Tom Castleman in fantasy. I was like a kid on Christmas in front of the tree, Tom. I was like, no stinking way.
And that was some back and forth too, where first that I needed an ambulance, but then it wasn't for me, but then it actually was for me. But anyway, my college football picks are all right in line with what we've been talking about on the show. The one that you and I both agree is the easiest one to choose: Oregon -3.5 against Penn State. This is one where maybe it ends up being a little bit closer, but just historically, the fact that the Nittany Lions don't keep these games particularly close gives me a lot of good confidence for Oregon. I'll also take Georgia +2.5, even though I don't feel super great about picking them to win. If I'm going to pick them to win, I may as well pick them to cover for this segment. And then, I'm all about the hopium that is the SMU Mustangs. That's a 2.5 point spread, so I'm going to go with them, Southern Methodist over Clemson. It's Southern Methodist, right? That's short for SMU.
SMU.
Good. Make
Yeah,
sure I got that right.
I agree with all three of your picks, by the way, Tom Castleman. All three of those picks make sense. I am riding with one of them. Also going Oregon -3.5 against Penn State. Only undefeated team, 12-0, the best team in the country. They knocked off Ohio State, Boise State in the tough games. They clobbered everybody else. More explosive offense, more explosive team. Penn State, again, put up big numbers against bad teams, against the good teams. Lose to Ohio State, only scored 13 points, only scored 21 points against Illinois. Drew Aller's better than last season, but man, Dylan Gabriel, way better passer, way better runner. The Ducks went outright, easily covered that 4-point spread. James Franklin's history of losing against good teams continues. Dan Lanning, the better coach. Give me the Ducks, quack, quack, to win by 4 or more against Penn State. Going to go with the Thursday night football game. Lions -3 over the Packers. Lions won 24-14 at Green Bay in the cold, in the rain. This is in Detroit's house. Couple injuries to their defense. The offense is healthy. Montgomery, Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Laporta off 2 touchdowns. Gibbs, Goff. These guys will be pumped to prove that second half against the Bears was anomaly versus something that we'll see going forward. I think they beat the Packers. They beat them by more than 3 points. Give me the Lions -3. And lastly, Tom, how about a revenge game? How about a revenge game? The Pittsburgh Steelers lost to the Cleveland Browns albeit in a very snowy,
Mhm.
cold conditions. It wasn't like a typical football game,
Double dipping on locks of the week, back to back.
right? Steelers -6.5 over the Browns. Pittsburgh's offense, bad defense for the Bengals, but 44 points. They're coming together. Pittsburgh is locked in this game. They're not letting the Browns beat them
Hmm.
twice. Jameis Winston, maybe he throws for 300 yards, but also maybe throws for 3 interceptions in this game. He had 4 touchdowns, 497 yards, 3 picks, 2 pick sixes, almost 3 the last game. Famous Jameis Winston. So I like the Steelers by a touchdown or more in the revenge game against the Browns.
All right, that sounds really good. I mean, no disagreements here. Those are all really, really nice picks. Moving on to sports trivia, Common. I've got a decent one, and you might know this one because this is a relatively topical one. As we saw on Monday Night Football, Josh Allen, or no, not Monday Night Football. Excuse
Are
me.
you going to do the same trivia question I have? Oh, this is
Depends.
going to
That
be
Josh
bad.
Allen is the first quarterback to throw, rush for, and receive a touchdown in the game. Who's the last player who accomplished that feat?
I have one better.
Oh, what's one better?
Can you name the 4 guys since the 70 merger that have done it?
I believe so. I can at least do three.
Okay, go ahead.
So the most recent one, as I'm sure you know, is
I have it written down. Christian McCaffrey.
Christian McCaffrey, the most recent to do that. Let's say, I believe prior to him it was LaDainian Tomlinson,
Yep,
and then I'm pretty sure it was in '79 it was Walter Payton.
that's one of them. And there's
So
one
there's
random
one
guy
other
that
one.
is way harder to get.
Oh, and it's not Frank Gifford because he was prior to the '70 merger, wasn't he?
Yep, that's a quarterback
Oh
as well, I believe.
no, and I know that it was a random name because when I heard this, I was like, "Oh, that's a random name." Uh there's no clues there. I'm just gonna know as soon as
He
you say
was
it
the
because
number 2 receiver on the Patriots team
oh,
early
yeah,
on
that's
in Tom
right.
Brady's
The
career.
receiver, yeah, David Patton.
David Patton.
That was the one that was random because it wasn't a running back.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right. So much for creativity on sports trivia. How about we share a statement of the week as well, if you will, Common? As there
Wow.
is
Creative. I
no,
know we mentioned it off air what it was going to be. These guys,
yeah,
what are they doing on this program today?
yeah. I'll have to.
Mine will be different than yours, though. I think it'll be a little bit different.
Well, my statement of the week is that the Bears really continue to show that they are a dysfunctional organization. This is something that I'd have to go back and check some of our prior shows, but I'm fairly certain I am on record as saying that it was a mistake to keep Matt Eberflus as the
I
head
agreed.
coach heading into the season. Not because, of course, not because he's a bad guy
He's a
or
good
anything
guy. Doesn't
along
matter
those
about
lines,
football games, though.
but the fact that there have been multiple instances in which he's shown his incompetence as an NFL head coach, I understand why they would reference, hey, we finished the season 5-3 and we battled back after having a bad season. Never mind the fact that several of those losses were in single score games where the Bears, by like the percentage, the indicator saying the Bears had a 90% chance or higher of winning the football game and finding a way to lose prior to or including the season. In one score games, Matt Eberflus was a 5-19 record. And I typically tend to
He's
believe that close
he's
games
never won
and
a road game on Sunday in the NFL.
never won a road game on Sunday. But I'm somebody who typically believes that close games can in a large sample be chalked up to variance. The fact that he is so much worse than what a standard deviation would be in a single score game indicates that he's not a particularly strong in-game head coach, to say nothing of the issues that he has had in back-to-back seasons having to dismiss coordinators prior to the season ending. Just an absolutely poor decision for the Bears to bring him back to start this season. It was completely backwards. Where I think you have to go back to, was it the 1993 or something like that? That was the last time that the GM, coach, and quarterback all lined up. That was when Dave Wanstead, I believe, was the GM and head coach, and then Eric Kramer was the quarterback that they chose. Um, since then, it has been some backwards combination of getting the quarterback for a year, then firing the coach, or saddling a GM with a coach that he then has to fire. The Bears have just been completely out of alignment for whatever reason. I mean, in a sample size this large, you point to the one common denominator, which is the folks running the team, the folks who actually own the team.
The
But yeah,
McCaskies.
the Bears are just a dysfunctional organization still, and the only saving grace is that they've probably, possibly, lucked themselves into having a quarterback that kind of exonerates all of that, or that can overcome all of that. So we'll see what happens over the last 5 games of the season. I think that the biggest positive sign that came out of this is that as a Bears fan, we don't have to root at cross purposes anymore. We don't have to root against our team a little bit because we don't want the head coach to come back, because we all know that he was not a good head coach. At this point, we can really say, okay, no chance Matt Eberflus is the head coach of the Bears next season. Where can things go from here? What more can we see? Including a little bit of a sneak peek at Thomas Brown, which, by the way, as a quick aside, I do think it would be a mistake to make him the full-time head coach at the ending of the season. But he's got 5 games to prove that he can be a legitimate candidate. Although I certainly think the Bears ought to look elsewhere, frankly.
Yeah, so I'm going to pivot a little bit on this statement because I think having watched the Bears and having watched them, you know, failure to call a timeout against the Lions, you know, with 20 seconds left, being at the line of scrimmage for like 8 seconds before snapping the ball, failure to get closer against the Green Bay Packers, for a field goal. I mean, all these late blown leads the last couple of years. It's obvious Matt Eberflus is not a good coach. That is obvious. And it's an obvious statement, so I'm not going to bother with it. Like I said, whenever the coach loses, he gets too much blame. Whenever the coach wins, he gets too much credit. Matt Eberflus on the current Bears roster, not counting the McCaskey family, which could be its own problem. But in terms of people that are either coaching or playing for the Bears, Matt Eberflus is actually still my number 2 guy to blame. I think there's a larger issue here beyond Matt Eberflus, and that is the Bears' offensive line. Yes, a play caller could get a young quarterback to get rid of the ball quicker. Yes, a play caller could design some plays to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands. Yes, a great offensive mind could generally talk to the quarterback and convince him, Caleb, you got to take off more often. You can't hold the ball so long. I'm not saying that a play caller can't make it better, but the amount of sacks the Bears are giving up, which is the most in the league, and they're like among the top 10 most in NFL history, is really bad. Their running game cannot get going. Their down the field passing game cannot get going. You can design some slants, Tom, and hit some slants for 7-8 yards apiece. But without an offensive line, you can't run the ball and you can't throw the ball deep. If you can't run the ball and you can't throw the ball deep, you're not going to win in the National Football League. So everyone's focused on who the next Bears head coach is. I'm focused on who the next Bears offensive lineman is. I want to see the Bears draft offensive line, offensive line, offensive line, defensive line, defensive line, offensive line. The Bears have the right guys at the receiver spot, the running back spot, the quarterback spot, the cornerback spot, the linebacker spot. Got to get back to Bears football. Play inside the trenches, in particular the offensive line, but the D-line also needs a little bit of work. Get these big guys, man. Don't just focus on the next coach. Focus on the next offensive lineman. What are the Bears at their best, Tom? A team that can run the ball, a team that can block, The 85 Bears, they blocked. Jimbo Covert, legend. He blocked. Nobody can block on this team. Caleb's holding the ball a little bit too long. Other than that, though, not turning the ball over. When he's given time, he's making great passes. Like you said, I agree the same way that you said it. The Bears maybe possibly found a quarterback. I can't say 100%, but I think maybe possibly he's got to work on getting rid of the ball, got to work on running quicker. When the pocket gets close, take off and run, Caleb. And run forward, not run around to, make a play. Run forward. But overall, he's a rookie. These are things he can correct, things he can improve. I still think the Bears are not a playoff team without at least, they don't have to have the best offense line in the league. They got to be at least mediocre. They got to be at least a top 20 offense. I don't even go top 15. If they're the 20th best offensive line with that defense, with those playmakers, they have a chance. But given that they're the 32nd best offensive line, it's the Bears and the Giants, the two worst offensive lines right now in the NFL. Forget the coach, Tom. I don't care about the coach. I care about the offensive line. Get those big, meaty guys. Draft me a coach that will go up to Ryan Poles and say, hey, Ryan, we got the X amount pick in the draft. I don't care who's on the board. Draft an offensive lineman. We got to block, Tom. We got to block.
No, I don't disagree. There definitely are still things to fix on this team. There's certainly not a perfect one yet, but if we're going to talk about whether or not they're a playoff team, you've got the Hail Mary that if the coach calls that timeout, make sure everybody knows what they're doing on that possession, or even calls a timeout, frankly, the possession before, to not even let that get in position. That's a win against Washington. You get a couple extra yards, you have a little bit of an easier kick against Green Bay. All of a sudden, we're taking a team from 4-8 to 6-6. That's in the hunt right there. Similar issue with Minnesota, where there was a blocked kick. That could have been a Bears win as well. And then, of course, the Detroit Lions, that game at the very least should have been going to overtime.
Yeah, but you know what led to the bad clock management? The fact that they couldn't block. Because it's a mute point if they could block, Tom. They got an offensive holding penalty, and then they got themselves a backwards sack against Caleb Williams.
I think that they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but I think that the Bears are
that Jaden Daniels game,
clear.
Jaden Daniels was very, very injured in that game.
That doesn't matter.
The Bears were lucky to be in that game.
I don't disagree with you, but I think that regardless of Jaden Daniels' health, the Bears could have won that game, and we're very easily talking about a team that could be 6-6 or 7-5.
You know why? Because they handed it off to an offensive lineman who couldn't get the job done. He didn't refrigerator Perriott.
And who called that? The coaching called that play. So I think I lean more coaches than player. On this one, although certainly the interior of that offensive line needs some bolstering, and they still need some help on the pass rush as well. But I mean, I just can't. I get what you're saying, but I think that of the two, getting the coach right is going to be more important, because good coaching
I say coach right is
mass.
40%, offensive line is 60% for me.
I'd flip that, but we're probably on the same boat right there.
I think every Bears fan is probably 99 coach, 1% everything else. Because that's all I hear about online. Yeah. We're celebrating a man getting his job, getting fired, and he should have been fired. I'm not disagreeing with it, but all the Bears fans talk about is blah, 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 Eberflus, Eberlus, blah, blah, blah. Let's lose games so we can fire Eberlus, blah, blah, blah. We're not talking about the offensive line, and we should be, because that offensive line stinks, Tom Castleman. It stinks.
It could be better.
It's most sacks allowed in the NFL this year, Tom.
It could be better.
It could be much better.
I think they have a couple good individual players. They just need to fix up at least 40% of the line. But I think a lot of the league can say that too. I think there's a lot of teams that could say
the Bears got to fix up the entire line. It's just been awful to watch, Tom.
I mean, it makes it very hard to watch. Tevin Jenkins. I think Tevin Jenkins and Darnell Wright do pretty well for themselves.
I don't know. I'm not impressed. I'm not
Well,
impressed by
that's a
the Bears
real
O-line.
that's this is a very tepid way of ending the show, I suppose.
That's okay. Let's all be sad about the Bears and their woes. But fun
Hey,
show,
I'm not
Tom.
sad. It's the holiday season. I'm perfectly content having other stuff to enjoy doing this time of year.
Go Chiefs. Right? Hop on the bandwagon, Tom Castleman. Go Chiefs.
If I'm hopping on a bandwagon, it will not be that one.
One more real quick hot take, real quick, not
Okay.
going deep. I'll give you a good take. The best story to win the Super Bowl, not the Detroit Lions, it's the Buffalo Bills. They've been so close
Hmm.
so many times. That
Yeah,
fan base, if Buffalo wins the Super Bowl, for me, better storyline than the Lions, personally.
I think both of those would be really solid.
Well, 1 and 2, but I got Buffalo 1, Detroit 2. Most people have Detroit as the best storyline.
Mhm.
I like the Bills as the best storyline in the NFL.
So is the three-peat third for you then, as far as storylines go?
No, three-peat will happen, but I'm talking about as far as most
But as a storyline,
intriguing,
like a three-peat's pretty intriguing,
not as intriguing as a team winning the Super Bowl for the first time. I mean, I'm
I
more
suppose.
interested in the three-peat as a Chiefs fan.
Sure.
But as far as like what's intriguing on the outside,
Hmm.
Buffalo after 4 straight Super Bowl losses, after all these heartbreaking playoff losses to the Chiefs,
Yeah.
they win the Super Bowl. That's the better story than the Lions, personally. That's what I think, at least.
That's where you're going to get kind of the borderline Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant holding a trophy and crying thing because the Bills have been through so much.
Right?
Oh, there's not
Exactly.
going to be a single table standing left in Buffalo, New York if that
Let's break
happens.
them tables, baby. The mafia. So anyway, good leave off point here, Tom. Another great show tonight. We'll be back in the next few weeks at some point. Looking forward to talking plenty more NFL, college football playoff. A lot of great topics to talk about sports. So we'll see you soon, Tom. Thanks to you and all the listeners, viewers. You guys are great. We'll see you guys soon.